What is good, everybody? I am Ryan Van Deaver. This is Jordan Van Deaver, and this is The Burn. I hope that everybody enjoyed all of the games during the week. I hope everybody had a great holiday, and man, I hope everybody was just blessed over the holidays. Jordan, how was your holiday, man?
It was great. Got to spend time with family, got to watch football. And watching football on the holidays is the best thing when you're a fan.
Yeah. Well, as you know, this channel, this podcast is the information that you need to know, built with you in mind, for the people, by the people, and with the people. Make sure you join the Hot Zone Sports community today. We are also a part of the SportCoin Network. SportCoin is a new sports network that helps fans find sports content while helping content creators grow. Are you tired of listening to the same voices on the big networks? I sure am. Well, break away from them and find the new sports content like this podcast. Remember, our show is wherever you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify. So if you could rate and review us, we would really appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, congratulations, you found Hot Zone Sports. Secondly, subscribe to the show and hit that notification button so you'll always know when our content drops. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. But on today's episode, man, we're going to get into absolutely all of it. We had one hell of a game tonight. Notre Dame, Georgia, and I hate to say it, I hate to do this. I really do, but, it's the first time in 30 years I've been able to celebrate anything. So here we go. Let's bring it out. So, Jordan, what were your big takeaways from this game? Like, it was a high caliber game against a high caliber team. I mean, it wasn't the same Georgia defense that we're used to seeing, of course. They didn't have Carson Beck, which I don't really think Carson Beck would have done much better than Gunnar Stockton. But what did you come away with?
Well, we knew Notre Dame would have their troubles against this Georgia defense. Like you said, they're not as great as they were years back. So they got a pretty good defense. They've shut down a few teams, but I think Riley Leonard handled it very well. He didn't pass for many yards, but this isn't a passing team. You don't see any of the receivers going over 1K yards. It's a rushing team. And yes, they lost Jeremiah Love, but Riley Leonard carried the team. Him and Fajan carried the whole team offensively. But I think the defense handled themselves very well. Like, it started off with that fumble recovery. I think that fired up the offense because there was like probably 50 seconds left in the half. And they got a touchdown to Jordan Fajan. So they walked in half 13-3. I think that was a great start.
Yeah, I mean, it was the final game of the quarterfinals, so it was kind of depressing for football guys like us. But I would be remiss if I did not start off me talking about Notre Dame. The game was postponed to tonight, this afternoon, after the terrorist attack on Bourbon Street in New Orleans in the early hours of January 1st, which left 15 dead and dozens injured. So our thoughts and prayers are with the victims' families and their loved ones. So I have to start it off with that. But getting back to the game, this is another example of a conference champ that was probably wondering if they were better off losing their title game. Speaking about Georgia, obviously, Georgia took on this Notre Dame team that is perhaps underrated because critics, they have this narrative about them. These critics still judge the Irish on their past failures in big spot, which is completely understandable. But in reality, they haven't won an important bowl game in decades, truth be told. This team is different. Okay. While Stockton looked capable against Texas, going against Notre Dame's defense was going to be different, especially with the defensive line of Notre Dame. They have been beyond spectacular all season long. I expected 5 sacks. They ended up getting 3. So let's not pinch quarters here. But they fell short of that prediction for me. It's sacks. All right, guys, give me a break. Forget that the Irish gave up 557 yards to USC in the regular season finale. When it counted against Indiana last week, or a couple weeks ago, Notre Dame smothered Curtis Rourke. Now, we fast forward into this game. They did much of the same. But there's a quote that is worth revisiting from a few days ago. Riley Leonard on if the Notre Dame coaching staff still tells him to slide or not to jump on quarterback runs. Riley Leonard said they don't even mention it anymore because it's a lost cause. In order to avoid Malachi Starks, Leonard basically just did a sideways jump towards the end of the game and avoided Starks, who was waiting for him to light him up. What did you think about Riley Leonard's game? I know he passed for 90 yards, which isn't something you expect from a quarterback. You're expecting, 200, 250, something like that, and some scrambles. What did you come away with?
Well, coming into this game, I didn't think he was going to pass for more than 200 yards because this team is really a rushing team. You see Riley Leonard against all these top-tier teams, he just runs the ball. He succeeds. He got 80 yards today, and I think he handled himself pretty well because when you're hurtling over someone, sacrificing your body, how is your defense not going to be motivated by that?
Yeah.
When you throw yourself out on the line for your defense, they're going to do more on defense. And that's what I hope for the next game.
Yeah, I mean, you had Gunnar Stockton with his first ever career start. And it's just, you got Riley Leonard, who has more career touchdowns, 75, and Stockton, who has career attempts before this game, which was 51. This was a turn of the corner type of moment for the Irish, who haven't won a bowl game in 30 years. Here, it's been a struggle, but in this game, the defense could stand toe-to-toe with the Dawgs, and before this game, they won 11 straight since their Northern Illinois game, and I know everybody wants to focus on this Northern Illinois game. I know they want to focus on their best win was Texas A&M, Louisville. I mean, I wouldn't even throw USC in the mix. But the bottom line is this. They beat the Dawgs. And they're going on to the college football playoff semifinals against Penn State. But Marcus Freeman in this game, he pulled off a move that was quite impressive for me because he has not been a head coach for a couple of years, all right? He pulled off the coaching move of the game against Kirby Smart, mind you, with the return of his offense to the field to put Georgia in a panic and ultimately force an offsides call. It was tremendous stuff from the third-year coach against one of the best coaches in the game. That was, there's only one way to put it. It was elite trickery by Notre Dame. The Irish sent out the offense on 4th down deep in their own territory, then successfully they got Georgia to jump off sides. The chains move. The drive continues. Time keeps ticking against the Bulldogs. And you got to give it to what Notre Dame did on their final possession, taking off 5+ minutes off the clock and leaving Georgia with little to nothing to work with.
Yeah, Ray Leonard was really impressive on that last drive because you don't want to leave the opposing team with 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. No. They could score in that time. I mean, they didn't score all game, really, except for that touchdown earlier in the game, but I was I was really surprised in what happened on the Georgia's offense when they got the ball back, because you would think they would throw it downfield because they need 2 touchdowns with 2 minutes left, but they ran the ball and they threw checkdowns. That's not going to get you down the field. With this Notre Dame defense, you're going to have to throw down the field. That's your only option.
And there was a couple of plays, like, what was it, the first or second drive where they threw it down the field, and it was just this, man, it was probably a 50-yard pass, and they ended up getting, Georgia ended up getting penalized 15 yards, and they were on the 10-yard line, so that took them back, and that pretty much took the wind out of their sails. They easily could have gotten that into the end zone with how close they were, but it was just, I don't know, man. It's like, what? How many penalties did Notre Dame have? Like 10, and Georgia had 4. I mean, a lot of those calls are pretty iffy calls to me, and that's not my Notre Dame bias. That's just the facts. Like, you don't see a lot of those calls being made in games, like the guy that, they said that he was going in motion. He wasn't fully set, and whether they're calling it on the tight end or face on, whoever you were calling it on, the wide receivers can still be moving while the ball is being snapped. That is in the rule book. So I don't know what these referees were doing on some of these questionable calls, but I'm glad it didn't cost Notre Dame the game, because otherwise there would be a ton of chirping out there, and we all know that the Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan base is massive.
Yeah, those penalties, I don't know if, like, all those 10 penalties, like the legal shifting call, I didn't see anything from that. Like you said, the wide receiver can still move while the play is developing. But I think that just motivated the Notre Dame offense to go out there and do their job, because they saw that wasn't a great call. And I feel like they were trying to bail Georgia out because Notre Dame was taking down all that time that they need. I didn't agree with it.
Yeah, I'm not going to be the guy who says the referees cost Notre Dame the game if they would have lost. But, man, I'm just saying, I'm not one of those. When it comes to the NFL, a perfect example would be the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, how they always get bailed out. If people want to go that route, I'm never going to go that route, because both teams get calls, both teams don't get calls. I mean, on this night, Georgia didn't exactly get called a lot, but I digress. But you have to say this has been a heck of a testament to Notre Dame's work in the portal. I mean, they aren't crazy busy in the portal like Colorado, like Ole Miss, like all of these, upper tier teams. And I'm not calling Notre Dame not an upper tier team, but they haven't proven that they are that type of team. They got Mitch Jeter, the kicker. They got him from South Carolina. He made 3 field goals. Bo Collins, wide receiver, got him from Clemson. He got a touchdown catch. Jaden Harrison, thank you. He got him from Marshall. It was a kickoff return score. Maybe you remembered it. Maybe you saw it. If you didn't, it's on my Hot Zone Sports on Facebook. Better go check it out. Shameless plug. Thank you. You got R.J. Oben from Duke, who had a strip sack, and that doesn't even get to Riley Leonard, who transferred from Duke. But you can't say enough about the job Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, has done, especially considering the top-level talent that the Irish have lost this season, with defensive lineman Riley Mills being the latest to be sidelined after losing standout cornerback Benjamin Morrison earlier this year. He's been really good at sending pressure at key times, like on that 4th and 2. And they have a stout defense that has held Georgia to 69 yards on 28 carries in this game. What did you think about Notre Dame's defense?
I thought it was great. I mean, like you said earlier, they only got to the quarterback a few times, but they brought pressure, and that's what counts. You know, on the stats you'll see sacks, tackles for loss, all that, but you don't always see how many pressures they got to the quarterback. I think Watts was great this game. He had 7 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. You need that against the Georgia offense, but I knew into this game that Georgia would have to get the receivers to catch the ball because they're leading the FBS and drops, and you can't be having that in these playoffs games. Yeah, you got to engage on every opportunity you can because every drive counts in the playoffs.
Yes, it does. And it was a heck of a performance by Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman has upgraded the athleticism on this roster. He's recruited very well. They've made smart moves through the portal, and Freeman's also made some excellent hires with both coordinators. But it felt like the Irish were one step ahead of the Bulldogs tonight. Notre Dame held Georgia to just 2 for 12 on third downs and 0 for 4 for fourth downs. They're headed to the Orange Bowl. Everybody clap. Everybody clap. I don't care if you hate them. I don't hate on your team. Don't hate on mine. But they are headed to the Orange Bowl to face Penn State, who, like Notre Dame, have taken full advantage of this expanded playoff field to get into the Final Four. But Penn State, they just beat Boise State, and we'll get into that. But they haven't really had a tough schedule when it comes to the playoff. Like, it almost felt like 2 gimme wins. Like, but you have to say that Penn State defense they're elite. All right, they are definitely elite.
Yeah, I believe that the Penn State defense is elite, but we didn't really have to see how great the offense is on Penn State because, like you said, they played Boise State, which they stopped the run against the best running back in the country, and really their defense does it all. So I think if they want to beat Notre Dame, they're going to have to get their offense going because they're not going to be the only ones on the field that have a great defense. We saw that from Notre Dame today. They knew it would be hard to commit to the run and the pass at the same time. Like, you never know what Georgia's going to do. We've seen that through the years. And I think Kirby Smart tried to bring his playbook out there, try to create new plays to do. But I think Notre Dame, they already knew what they were doing. They figured it out early in the game.
Yeah, and, it's just, I mean, the game's going to be played on the 9th, so you got 1 week to prepare. And from all the reports that I read earlier today, which is why the game was being played at this time, was because Notre Dame, the winner of this game between Notre Dame and Georgia, was going to have less time to prepare than, say, Penn State was. And it's not just because it was just an additional day later. So Notre Dame gets a dominant quarterfinals win with 244 total yards on offense, 4 yards per play. But this team knows exactly who it is and is following that formula. They're not a pass-heavy team. They're going to play that defense. They're going to find an edge in the kicking game. They're going to be resourceful. And Riley Leonard is going to play smart football. He threw for 90 yards, but he ran for 80. Penn State, Notre Dame should be a throwback, slobber knocker type of game in the semifinals. I predicted this game to be a win for Notre Dame. And no, there is no Notre Dame bias here. Jeez. I picked Notre Dame to win 23-19, and it was pretty close to that. So I'm going to pat myself on the back on that one. But let's just go ahead and move on to this Ohio State versus Oregon game. This was supposed to be the most fascinating of all of the quarterfinals matchups, a traditional Rose Bowl when ignoring the realignment between teams who were separated by 1 point in that first meeting and now separated by 2.5 points. That was the line. It was favoring the Buckeyes. Even the quarterbacks, Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel, had completed the same rate of passes at 73.2%. The rematch of college football's game of the regular season just failed to live up to the hype as number 8, Ohio State. By the way, number 8, the NCAA's got to do something about this, but I'm going to touch on that here in a minute. But Ohio State took out its frustrations on top seed Oregon in a 41-21 victory in the Rose Bowl quarterfinal. But the first meeting between these Big Ten foes on October 12th was a 32-31 win for the Ducks in Autzen Stadium. It featured 7 lead changes, but the Buckeyes took a 7-0 advantage on a 3-play drive within the first minute of action, and they never looked back in this game. But fueling the blowout was a potent passing attack led by freshman wide receiver Jeremiah Smith. And let me just talk about this man for a minute. This guy, if he was a junior right now, he would be the first wide receiver off of the board. I don't care about Travis Hunter. He is not as an elite pass catcher as Jeremiah Smith. I mean, he had a season best 187 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 7 receptions, despite entering the game as an obvious focal point of the Ducks' defensive efforts. Like, that man went absolutely crazy.
Yeah, he went crazy. Like, Oregon going into this game, they should know who Will Howard is going to throw to, because this freshman wide receiver has been going at it since he got at Ohio State. He's probably the best freshman wide receiver we've seen in a while. And I think in the first half, he had 2 receptions for 74 yards. I just knew that first reception I think it was for a touchdown. I knew he was going to go crazy after that, because this Oregon defense did not commit to him. You gotta put all your attention on Jeremiah Smith, because if you don't, he's gonna get a touchdown. But you also got to worry about Ibuka, and you got to worry about Tate. But it wasn't just a passing game. Henderson got some space for a touchdown before half too. And I think they were fired up because of that game you said earlier, when the Oregon and Ohio State faced off last. They were fired up.
I mean, Ohio State led by as many as 34 points in the first half. Before Oregon, they made a brief run between the end of the second quarter and the start of the third quarter with back-to-back scores that cut the lead to 19. I mean, it was a valiant effort, but I think we all knew the outcome of this game when they walked into halftime. I mean, you saw the broadcasters and how they were saying, what kind of speech do you give your team at halftime? Like, you still have to play a second half. I mean, I guess you could forfeit it, but I don't think that you would forfeit a game in the college football playoff. The Buckeyes were able to respond, when the Ducks when they scored those 2 touchdowns, and it was just bad. But one thing that we should probably touch on is, with star wide receiver Evan Stewart from the Ducks being ruled out during pregame warmups, Oregon's offense failed to find any type of success it did against Ohio State's defense in October, at least when it mattered. Though quarterback Dylan Gabriel finished his college career with 299 passing yards and tied Case Keenum's all-time mark of 155 career touchdowns, he looked uncomfortable, massively uncomfortable throughout much of the first half until the offense's first scoring drive as they expired before the half. Oregon racked up just 21 yards on the ground, not including sacks, of which the Buckeyes had 8, when the Ducks allowed 13 sacks all season long. Ohio State's defense ruled the trenches with those 8 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, marking a complete reversal from that October game.
Yeah, you can't just focus on rushing and passing, because really they started off passing and that worked. They did it the whole first half, but they finished off with a rushing touchdown with Henderson. But if you take the focus off of Henderson, you still got Judkins, and we all know he's a great running back. But I think Oregon just didn't know what they wanted to commit to on defense. They didn't know what they were doing. And I just saw that Jalen Gabriel, he couldn't get any of his receivers open. I mean, before the half, he drove down the field for a 74-yard drive. But other than that, they really did nothing. And Ohio State took advantage of what they did the whole game.
It was a wild game. I mean, I think we all expected like a 33-32 type game. No, that wasn't my prediction. I predicted Ohio State to win, but I didn't expect them to win by 21 points. But Wednesday's result was the first 20-point loss by a number 1 team since the 2019 college football playoff title game, where Clemson beat Alabama 44-16. Here's some more facts. 187 yards receiving are the 5th most in the college football playoff game. Additionally, he set an Ohio State record for most receiving yards in a game by a freshman, and a new Big Ten record for most touchdown catches by a freshman, with 14 in a season. With the victory, the Buckeyes have now passed arch rival Michigan for the most Rose Bowl wins at 10, if that means anything to you. That's second to only USC at 25. But counting sacks, Oregon had negative 23 yards rushing. That's the second worst total ever for a number 1 team since 2000. Only Florida, when they had negative 36 rushing yards versus Auburn in 2001, had a lower total. After a Rose Bowl blowout in which his top-ranked Oregon Ducks were blitzed off the field, Dan Lanning had an interesting quote. And I'm really going to want to get your take on this, because let's not be reminded, although I'm going to remind you, when he went after Deion Sanders last year, we're not about clicks. Well, this year he was about clicks when he destroyed a Washington Huskies helmet with a sledgehammer. I digress. Lanning was still singing from the fact that his team was completely outmatched on the field. He invoked the Michigan Wolverines during the post-game presser. Surely he knew this was going to draw the ire of Buckeye fans who are still stinging from the manhandling they endured at the hands of the Wolverines, not to mention everybody else. When they talk about Ohio State, they always revert back to this Wolverines-Ohio State game. That was their worst game. This was their best game. So they're always going to be bringing those back. But let's get back to it. Having lost the granddaddy of them all, Dan Lanning decided to throw some shade, where he said on his parting shot, "Sometimes it's not your day." I think that was us today. It wasn't our day today. It wasn't their day against Michigan. What do you think, man?
You can't do that. Like, you're walking into this game, you already know the Ohio State offense, defense, whatever, is going to be fired up because of the last time they played. But you can't throw shade at the Ohio State team, because they already want to beat you in this game. And if you fire them up, they're just going to fire back at you.
Well, they ended up losing this game, and Dan Lanning, he was able to land that final shot at Ohio State. But really, you gotta think about Dan Lanning, right? How many times has he won big games, right? Oregon, their boosters, they basically gave him a blank check. And what happened from that blank check? I get it, injuries, whatnot. But when your team shows up and you get dominated, 41, you lose by 20 plus points. That has to say something about you as a coach. You were not prepared, and you had more time to prepare for this. Say what you want about they had a bye week. A bye week is meant for healing your players. Your job as a coach is to prepare your team, to have them fully prepared for what they are going to run into. But it's just, this was called the most talented team in the country. But in my opinion, Ohio State is the most talented team in the country, the deepest team, and one of the most expensive team when it comes to name, image, and likeness, roster budgets. And when it finally looks the part, this team is unstoppable. If I'll touch on that here in a minute. In the 2 college football playoff games, Ohio State has outscored its opponents 83-38 and outgained them 973 to 532. A mentality shift has helped this team reach its full potential. Tennessee in the first round was a start, and Wednesday was the statement game against a previously beaten top-seeded team for the rest of the country to see. In 2 playoff games, Ohio State has 12 sacks. Keep in mind they had 8 sacks in this game. It had 35 in the first 12 games of the regular season. One of the major questions for Ohio State's defense was its lack of pressure, and looks like it has fixed that. But the most impressive change has been with the offense. After scoring just 10 points against Michigan, the Buckeyes' offense has been a more aggressive group, tallying 973 yards in 2 games and finally using its playmakers on the perimeter. Howard has totaled 630 yards passing in the playoff. Wide receiver Jeremiah Smith has caught 13 passes for 290 yards and 4 touchdowns in these 2 games, but the ball is moving around. Emeka Egbuka has 10 catches and 1 touchdown. Tight end G. Scott has been playing well, and Ohio State has found ways to get its running back duo involved, even with an injured offensive line.
Yeah, it's really scary when this type of offense gets rolling early in the playoffs. Because like you said, Jeremiah Smith going off.
Yeah.
He had over 200 reception yards this game, and it wasn't just him either, because there's so many weapons on that offense you need to worry about. You can't just commit to one receiver, because then the other one's going to be wide open. That's just how it is on the Ohio State team. They're such a high-rated team that they have so many recruits that are coming in that could make a difference in the playoffs. But it's not just their offense. That was the main thing people are thinking about right now. But the defense stopped Dylan Gabriel and Oregon's undefeated record. I was thinking it would be a lot closer of a game coming in, but they just shut down Dylan Gabriel in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to be difficult all the way around. Even if they did somehow put Ohio State at a standstill, it was, it's just, this game was just absolutely ridiculous in every type of way. Nobody really saw this coming. But let's go ahead and move on to the Fiesta Bowl, where number 6 Penn State faced off against Boise State. I mean, at this point, before this game, you had to wonder if any of the underdogs were going to put up a fight. The number 6 seed is a double-digit favorite in this game. I believe they were a 12.5-point favorite. So This is a prime example of this tournament's egregious seeding. Yes, Boise State standout Ashton Jeanty ran wild this year, but this was a major step up in competition from what he's used to seeing on a weekly basis. This is not the MWC. This was the Big Ten. Boise State did travel to Oregon early in September. How can we forget? And they lost by just a field goal, an impressive performance. But Penn State demolished SMU in round one. And everybody thought SMU or Ohio State was the lesser of the two evils, so to speak. People thought that SMU was better than Boise State. But the Nittany Lions in that game only generated 325 yards on 18 first downs. Number 6, Penn State held GT in check and overcame some questionable play calling on offense, which we will touch on, to beat Boise State 31-14 in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. The Nittany Lions advanced to the playoff semifinals against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. Well, not in the Sugar Bowl. It's going to be the Orange Bowl. If Boise was going to pull off any sort of upset in which would have qualified as the school's biggest game ever, Maddox Madsen was going to have an elite game. And he didn't have a bad game, going 23-34 for 304 yards, until you look at the interceptions in this game. He threw 3 picks in this game. They were never going to win this game of this magnitude with these types of turnovers. If Boise State was going to be that Cinderella team, it was going to need a big game from running back Ashton Jeanty. Of course, if you're box score watching, then that's okay. 126 yards on 30 carries. That is a 3.5 yards per carry clip. What did you think about this game?
Well, like I said earlier, Penn State has a great defense. They do the offense's job for them. Like, most of the time they do, but Allar didn't play the best game, but he didn't play as bad as Madsen. But we don't see Madsen pass the ball as much as Allar does, because Boise State is a running team. Like, you see how many carries Ashton Jeanty gets. He got 30 carries this game. You're not going to see a lot of running backs get that many carries. And I just think Boise State didn't have any weapons on offense, because Ashton Jeanty is their only weapon, really. That's how I think about it, because Madsen got his chance to throw the ball this game because they were stopping Ashton Jeanty. But those 3 interceptions could have gone more to the touchdowns. So he needed touchdowns late in the game, and he could not perform that for them.
Yeah, I mean, on a team where Jeanty has averaged 192 yards on the ground per game, Madsen is averaging more than 29 passes per game. He is the only player in the country to throw for at least 20 touchdowns and commit less than 5 turnovers. So Madsen, he was a difference maker this season. But that's not how this game ended up. We also need to touch on Jeanty's pursuit of Barry Sanders' rushing record. That was a sidebar to this game, in which he came short by 27 yards. Penn State's defense was peaking coming into this game, as it led the Big Ten with 102 tackles for loss, which was ranked 7th nationally. The defensive line trio of Abdul Carter, Zane Durant, and Danny Dennis Sutton have accounted for 50 of those tackle for losses, which was almost, if you calculate it, it is 3.6 per game, almost. Penn State hasn't given up in any of those games 192 yards rushing that Jeanty alone averaged on the ground. Something was going to have to give here in this game, and we saw the results. A dominant defensive effort from the Nittany Lions. But Penn State did take Boise State off the hook a little bit in this game. I know, Nittany Lion fans. But they could have easily run up the score in this game. But instead of playing off of their strength, which was running the rock in this game, where they had a 216 rushing yards on a 5.3 clip, and where Katron Allen was just dominating the game with 134 yards on 17 carries on a 7.9 yard per carry clip, this felt like Penn State were trying to prove to the world that Drew Allar could be an efficient passer. So, Nittany Lions fans, in some ways, he was, but they were gashing the Broncos in the running game, not the passing game. And we all know what happens when Drew Allar passes the ball against a good defense. The Broncos aren't a good defense, but against a good defense. Let's just backtrack. Okay. When Penn State is favored to win a game, they're the most consistent team in all of college football. When they are favored to win a game, they will win that game. Drew Allar will go nuts, just like he does against poorly schemed defensive teams. But in this game, it was just, yeah, he was efficient, but it wasn't that great.
I mean, you can't be mad that he didn't throw for more than 200 yards. I mean, he was efficient. He didn't throw any picks, which that was a problem for Boise State and Madison. But he threw 3 picks, 2 of them to Warren, which best tight end in this coming draft. It's hard to stop Warren, but back to the point, Allar wasn't great. I thought he would take advantage of this defense, because the defense isn't the one that carried Boise State this whole season. I think we know who carried Boise State, but either way, I think it was a good enough game for them to win. But this coming game for them, they gotta go harder, because they're not playing a Boise State defense. I think we saw how good Notre Dame's defense was today. Allar's gonna have to do a lot more in this game.
Yeah. But one thing that everybody is wanting to talk about right now is reseeding. All right. The Boise State Broncos, they had an incredible year. All right. They went 12-2 overall, 7-0 in conference play. They won the Mountain West, and as a result of that strong season, they received an automatic bid into the college football playoff and earned a first-round bye. They were the number 3 seed. Unfortunately, Boise State looked nothing like a number 3 seed in this game and was thoroughly outclassed and demolished by the number 6 seeded Penn State Nittany Lions in this Fiesta Bowl. Madsen, he threw those 3 picks, and JT, God, he struggled against it. He finally found out what an elite run defense looked like. But it's just, there's got to be a clear solution to who deserves to make the cut. They won their conferences, Arizona State, Boise State, and both of these teams in particular, they lost 2 regular season games. Keeping the automatic bids makes sense in a way, but why do these teams need automatic first-round buys? The clear solution to make these games more interesting is to let the conference champions get in, but not reseed. Why can't the committee just seed the playoffs by the rankings? At no point were Boise State and Arizona State number 3 and number 4, respectively, in the nation. At no point. So why are they giving these high seeds buys for winning weaker conferences? Now, I am a Big 12 guy, but hey, I will call a spade any day of the week. There's no reason why Georgia should be ranked lower than Arizona State. There's no reason why Boise State should be ranked higher than Ohio State. I mean, while it's fun to put these teams like Arizona State and Boise State in the second round, the result of doing so is that of what we just witnessed over the past couple of days. had the seeding been done differently, the beginning of the second round of the college football playoff probably would have been a lot more entertaining, as the matchups would have featured better teams. Conference winners should have a spot in the college football playoff, but anything beyond that should be based off of merit.
Yeah, I'm a huge college football fan. Like, I love watching college football, but this was the first round of the playoffs was not impressive. I know a lot of fans out there wanted something impressive in the first round, something exciting. But speaking of this Boise State game, I mean, it was a low-scoring game. I mean, Penn State scored 31 points, but they're playing Boise State. Boise State's defense isn't that good. And you expect Penn State to put up maybe 40, 50. Like, I think they just knew they were playing against a bad defense, knew they could stop Boise State's offense, so they just sat there and watched the game. I don't think that they wanted to score any more points than they had to.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, Oregon fans. Let's just talk about Oregon fans right now. How pissed off are Oregon fans right now? That I am genuinely curious, because you're the number one team in the nation, and your first game coming off of the bye, you have to play. Well, what were they, number 8 ranked Ohio State? So let's do a hypothetical. It's not really a hypothetical, but let's do it anyway. Say March Madness. You got Duke as a number 1 seed, and you're playing, I don't know, Hofstra, okay? Pull that name out of my ass. Say you're playing Hofstra. You're a 16 seed. You're expected to win by 15, 20 points. That's usually how it works, unless you're Purdue and you end up blowing the house down by losing to a 16 seed. No, I'm not pushing you, Purdue and Purdue fans. I'm sorry. But the fact of the matter is this. Like, you're a number 1 seed. Yeah, you're going to have a little fluffy opponent. That's how it works. You get the easiest path. But in reality, the number 5 seed, which is Texas, they have the easiest path. And now they have to go up against Ohio State. If Ohio State is playing Texas the way they played Tennessee and the way they played the previous Oregon, like, that's not going to be an easier path. But, back on topic, like, as a number 1 seed, you're expected to have a certain type of opponent. And Ohio State is not an 8 seed. They are not. And that's what makes this college football, the reseeding that needs to happen. There needs to be metrics added and different procedures and policies added into this, because the way the NCAA works is the fact that they only change stuff when stuff makes the NCAA look bad. And this is ultimately going to have to be changed, because, we hadn't really had a close game until that Arizona State-Texas game. And we had already had 4 games previously before that.
Yeah, to speak more on that easy path through the playoffs, I think Penn State had the easiest path to the playoffs. They're going to have a whole nother thing coming, because this next game ain't no easy path. These playoffs games aren't supposed to be an easy path. It's supposed to be competitive, but I think the committee made a bad decision this year, because I know all college football fans out there wanted these first round games to be very competitive, not these low scoring games and defense carrying it all, as we saw in Penn State's first round.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But let's go ahead and move on to the Peach Bowl. It was number 5 Texas versus number 4 Arizona State. Texas may or may not be the nation's best football program when the 2024 season is. But Arizona State has already claimed the title of most entertaining, whatever the scoreboard says. And the Sun Devils' Cam Skattebo might have just forced a 2024 Heisman revote. I mean, after Arizona State trailed by 16 points in the waning minutes of the Peach Bowl against the heavily favored Texas Longhorns, I believe they were 13.5-point favorites, the Sun Devils running back Cam Skattebo was largely stifled, and he couldn't really get anything going. And he found himself vomiting profusely on the sideline. Skattebo, who finished 5th in this year's Heisman voting, will live on in infamy in Texas nightmares after Wednesday, a reminder that records, resumes, history, and pedigree doesn't mean a damn thing between the tackles. Skattebo had one of the more ridiculous highlights of the game where he threw a pass, a 42-yard touchdown pass to Malik McCain, and Arizona State converted a 2-point conversion to close the gap 24-16. 2 plays later, Arizona State's Javon Robinson intercepted Ewers. Skattebo made Texas pay, burning the Longhorns on the very next play for 62 yards, soon afterward punching in both a touchdown and a tying 2-point conversion. The Longhorns ultimately pulled off a 39-31 victory over the Sun Devils in double overtime, but the final minutes of the 2025 Peach Bowl will go down in history for its excitement. Arizona State scored 16 unanswered points with a pair of touchdowns and 2-point conversions, and Texas kicker Bert Auburn missed 2 field goals that could have iced the game.
Yeah, it was just an impressive game for the Arizona State running back, Skattebo. I mean, the Arizona State quarterback, Levitt, he didn't have a great game. I mean, I think that he didn't make the contributions that he needed to make, really, because he threw for over 200 yards, 222, but he didn't throw for a single touchdown. I mean, the running back threw a passing touchdown. And at this point, you should just put the punter that threw for 39 yards for a 4th down conversion, put him at QB because Levitt did barely anything this game. I mean, he got them down the field, but really Skattebo did that for them. I mean, he didn't just rush and pass. He put up 8 receptions for 99 yards. I mean, that's not easy for a running back. And if we're talking about the Heisman vote, I know this is a controversial thing everybody's talking about. Travis Hunter shouldn't have won that Heisman. I mean, there's 2 running backs that could have won the Heisman. And also Dylan Gabriel up there, but we all saw how he played in the game today. So I think the running backs this year have been very impressive. There's been a lot of running backs this year that's got over 1K yards.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Skattebo, he left it out all on the field versus Texas. He had 39 touches, 284 total yards, 3 touchdowns. Cam Skattebo finishes the season breaking the single-season rushing records for touchdowns, single-season total touchdowns, and single-season rushing yards records. He personally accounted for more yards versus Texas, 284, than Georgia did in the SEC title game with 277. I don't care what the final score ended up being. Cam Skattebo was having an unbelievable game against the number 2 defense in the country. But let's just do this. With 6 minutes and 31 seconds left in the game, he had 130 rushing yards, 21 receiving, and a 42-yard touchdown pass. Cam Skattebo was named the MVP of the Peach Bowl. It's the first time in 26 years that the member of a losing team has won the game's offensive MVP award. And I know. I've seen your comments on my social media pages that this is a participation award. Cam Skattebo winning is a participation award. You're teaching kids that participation. He was the best player on the damn field. Okay? Do not get it twisted. Name another player on both teams who was better than him. I'll give you the answer. 0. Nobody else was better than him. Or are you going to give it to Golden? He basically disappeared for 3 quarters. I mean, who else are you going to give it to?
Can't give it to Quinn Ewers. I mean, he had a good game, but you don't see running backs in these type of games get touchdowns in like 3 different categories. I mean, I don't think he got a touchdown in receiving, but he still got 99 yards, and that's impressive for a running back. So people can say what they want about the MVP of this game, but no one's gonna beat him out of that MVP because the only one close would be Godin, but as you said, he disappeared. You got to show up the whole game. He had 7 receptions, 149 yards, 1 touchdown, but that's not enough to win an MVP if the opposing running back is playing like this guy is.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to really chalk it up, like Quinn Ewers, he's just like, I know people are trying to hype him up on that, but he was 20 of 30, okay, 66%, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 129-17 QBR. Okay, he had the pick, and he was basically dinking and dunking most of the game. Yeah, he had 2 or maybe 3 or 4 passes that went for deep, but there's nothing crazy. And Quintrivion Wisner, 18 attempts, 45 yards, 2.5 average for clip. Like, okay, let's go down the receiving. Jadon Blue, 1 reception. Gunnar Helm, 3 receptions, 56 yards. Golden, that was probably, if you would have given it to anybody, it probably would have been him. But you're not going to not give it to Cam Skattebo. He had the touchdown pass for 42 yards, 30 attempts, 143 yards. Yeah, that's a 4.76 average. But on top of that, he had 8 receptions, 99 yards. He did it in absolutely every part of the game. Really, the only part of the game where he didn't do anything was kicking. So, I mean, we're just going to have to, for all those guys out there who think that he didn't deserve this, I mean, you're out of your damn mind. He did it as a quarterback, did it as a running back, he did it as a receiver as well. But Texas' 39-31 win over Arizona State at the Peach Bowl was an instant classic. It has been by far the best game of the 12-team college football playoff and one of the best games of the year by any metric. Left for dead after going down 2 touchdowns early, Arizona stomped its way back into the fight, tying the game at 24 with just over 5 minutes remaining. But moving on, you have to have concern for the kicker from Texas, Auburn. He missed 2 crucial field goals, and if he would have made one of those field goals, then there wouldn't have been any overtime whatsoever. And you're moving on to play the Ohio State University, where if you make a single mistake, they will drag you through the dirt.
Yeah, when you play Ohio State, you can't make those mistakes. We saw Oregon make mistakes, and Ohio State capitalized off of all their mistakes. So if you miss those 3 points that you get throughout that game, you're going to lose. I mean, I'd rather take a touchdown if I was Texas, because whether or not they stop Jeremiah Smith, which I don't know if that's going to happen, but they got good defense on them. So I think they have to commit to the pass more than the run, because the run is impressive on Ohio State, because they got Henderson and Judkins, but really versus Oregon, their passing game was the most impressive.
Yeah.
But going back to the kicking performance of Texas, he's going to have to figure this out, because if you don't get those points, every point matters in these type of games. We've seen close games in these playoff games before. Years back, 1-point games, 1-possession games. Wait, you can't miss those points, especially in the NFL too. You can't miss those points either.
No, you can't. But there was one part of the game that really needs to be discussed about. I know everybody in the world's discussing it, and we're going to touch on this topic as well. Texas safety Michael Taffy. All right, so let's do the play-by-play. Okay, with less than 90 seconds remaining, the Sun Devils were on the move, and quarterback Sam Levitt found Melquan Stovall across the middle for a 10-yard gain to midfield. Texas safety Michael Taffy met Stovall at the logo, laying out Stovall on the Arizona State 48 with a cracking hit. Helmets collided, leaving Stovall prone on the field for several minutes. The assumption in the stadium, and on my screen, and on screens worldwide, was that this was going to be flagged as targeting, and that he was going to get ejected for such act. And Arizona State would move up to the 37 with just over a minute remaining in the game, and with an upset to be on hand. Only there was no flag. Officials in the booth decided that Taffy wasn't guilty of targeting, and Arizona State would face a 4th and 5 at midfield. They would punt the ball away. Another missed Texas field goal gave Arizona State a chance in overtime, but blown coverage on 2 straight plays and a Levitt interception doomed the Sun Devils' hopes for an epochal upset. So, attention turned back to that targeting call and the promise of an upset that vanished. The first part of Taffy that contacts Stovall is the helmet, which would seem to be a textbook case of targeting, right? But nobody involved in college football reads textbooks anymore, do they? Being as generous as humanly possible here, you could argue that Taffy, 1, did not launch himself into Stovall, and 2, did not lean with the crown of his helmet. Yes, I've read all of your comments. No, I'm not going to respond to every single one of them. No, that's not happening. But he did not lean with the crown of his helmet, which are 2 of the elements involved in targeting. So, from the pedantic standpoint, this would appear to be a case of adhering to the letter rather than the spirit of the law, breaking down the precise trajectories involving and determining that they do not meet the literal definition of targeting, rather than observing that, Taffy's helmet made Stovall's helmet snap backwards. Was this a case of the referees basically swallowing their whistles and letting the game play out, blood and all, like the final minutes of an NBA playoff game? Perhaps. But even the NBA will call a foul if a player hurls over another into the 5th row, unless it's like LeBron James doing the hurling. They won't call that. There are and should be limits to let them play. And that has to be what this is. And it sure seemed like this surpassed those limits. But this is worth noting. There's absolutely no guarantee Arizona State would have won the game, even with the targeting call. The Sun Devils struggled with field goals all season long with 3 different kickers, converting only 11 of 20 on the year. For the Peach Bowl, Dillingham went with Karsten Kiefer, who only converted his first field goal of the entire season at the Big 12 championship last month. He was 2 of 3 on the day already and would have been facing as much as a 52-yard kick to win the game. That's a hell of a lot of pressure to put on a redshirt freshman. Still, Arizona State should have gotten the chance or at least understood why it didn't. Targeting isn't a necessary penalty to protect the safety of players on both sides of the ball, but officials have responsibility to communicate its parameters, call it correctly, and ensure that both coaches and players understand the rule. Too much is at stake, and too much was at stake at this moment in time, both with safety and with the game. To leave it up for debate is just preposterous.
Yeah, a lot of people debate about all these calls that were not called, but that targeting call would make no sense because, like you said, you can look in the rule book and there was no helmet to helmet. Sure, their helmets touched, but it's going to happen when you're tackling somebody. It's bound to happen. But I didn't see targeting. I saw that he was already running his way when he saw the ball thrown to him. You can't stop yourself when you're going full speed. It's going to take a little second to stop yourself, but to the kicker, a lot of teams have troubles with kicking the ball. A lot of teams have to find the right kicker so they can win their key games like Arizona State's game. But I think he could have done better, but I don't think after that targeting call, if they would have called it, I don't think they would have won the game either way. But either way, it was an impressive game from Skattebo. You can't take that away from him.
Yeah, I mean, this year, Texas began the season as one of the nation's highest-ranked programs, while Arizona State was projected to finish in the bottom of the Big 12. Texas returned its pair of marquee quarterbacks, Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, and a gentle SEC schedule helped ease the Longhorns' transition into the new conference. Struggles against Georgia in both the regular season and the SEC championship pushed Texas into the number 5 slot, where the Longhorns easily handled the 12th-seeded Clemson in the first round of the playoff. Now, at the other end of the preseason polls, Kenny Dillingham's 2024 Sun Devils were nothing if not opportunistic, both on the field and in the transfer portal. They embodied by thundering running back Skattebo, Arizona State threw a freewheeling, chaotic offense at the Big 12, and more often than not, they came on top. The Sun Devils won the Big 12 Conference Championship and rolled into the college football playoff at 11-2. Now, if you were an Arizona State fan, I know this loss stings, but you have a lot of things to be proud of because the future is bright for you guys. I mean, you were expected to finish last in the Big 12, and here you are. You made it to the college football playoff. Yeah, you probably could have made it to the semifinals, but we won't talk.
Yeah, it was although it was an impressive season from Arizona State. Like you said, they were projected to finish at the bottom. That's gonna light up a lot of teams. If you're projected at the bottom and you think you're a good team, you think you could lead your conference, you think you're good and all that. That lit their team up to succeed. But I think in this game, I don't think their defense competed as much as their offense. I know Arizona State's quarterback didn't do the greatest, but they still had Skattebo on their offense. He did a lot this game. I mean, he won the MVP of the game, but I think the defense could have handled themselves better. Maybe they would have won, but
I mean, to put it into reference, Sam Levitt went 24 for 46, 52% completion percentage, 222 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 59.66 QBR. For those who were wondering. In reference, Quinn Ewers, 20 of 30, 66%, 322, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 129 QBR. So that in itself is going. That's about it. I mean, my big thing, to end the episode, I am going to ask you one specific question. Texas is playing Ohio State next, and all of the Texas fans have been pining for Arch Manning. But Steve Sarkisian does not want to put him in. I think it's because of the boosters. He doesn't want to be told what to do. But beyond that, what do you think it is going to take if Quinn Ewers comes out in this game slow, sluggish, not efficient? How long do you think it'll take until Sarkisian throws Manning in there?
Well, we've seen Manning come in on fourth downs, third downs, but I think he's just he doesn't know when to put him in. He has too much belief in Quinn Ewers as a quarterback. But I think if Quinn Ewers starts the game awful, like I'm talking 2 picks, maybe a pick 6 out there, just hypothetical, but I think Quinn Ewers is going to have to either get injured, like the Carson Beck situation, or he's going to have to play awful. I'd love to see Arch Manning out there. I'd love to see that in a playoff game like this, but I don't think he's going to come out unless it's a fourth down, or they're at the goal line and they want to run. That's all they use him for.
I just don't see how they're going to be able to put him in there. Like, let's say Quinn Ewers starts the game going 0 for 9, 2 picks, can't get anything going. Do you have the balls to throw him out there against the number 1 defense in all of FBS? Are you going to have those set of stones? You didn't want to bring him in against Georgia in the SEC championship. You didn't want to give him any play in that first round. You didn't want to throw him in there against Arizona State, even though Ewers wasn't playing his best. I have a hard time feeling that Sark is going to bring in Manning against the number 1 defense in the nation. And we all saw what Dylan Gabriel went through when he played Ohio State. Like, that dude just looked massively confused the entire game. He didn't know what he was looking at. And you only got 1 week to prepare for Ohio State. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, 1 week might seem a lot to a lot of people, but that's just for rest and the coach trying to prepare their players for whoever they're facing. And I think Texas needs a lot more time on the clock to basically tell their players what they're about to face, because Ohio State will throw weird defenses at you. I mean, I saw what they threw at Dylan Gabriel. Gabriel has way more starts than Arch Manning. I mean, he hasn't been put out there, so he's not going to have as many starts, but Dylan Gabriel's a good quarterback. I mean, we've seen him all year. They haven't even lost a game, except for, what game. But I think the Ohio State defense they're definitely the best defense in the playoffs right now. I haven't seen a better defense. I mean, you could throw Penn State's defense out there, but
I mean, Ohio State's defense is different because Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, he's been there for a few years now. He has figured it out with this team where he doesn't have to blitz anybody unless he wants to bring added pressure. He brings these looks that just confuse the living out of the quarterbacks, and ultimately they don't know what to do. And then by the time they realize, oh, I have an open guy, I got 3 guys in my face. And they don't have to bring any added pressure. that 4-man front does enough for them. So it's just, I don't know. I think it's going to be an uphill climb for Texas, but this is not a prediction show. We will be doing that later. But before you leave, give this video a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed it. Can you do that? It really helps us pop in a big way. Everything here is free. That's all we ask you. Leave a comment below. And if you're on the podcast on Apple or Spotify, drop that 5-star review and rating. It does help us out tremendously. So I hope that everybody enjoyed this show. And thank you guys for watching. Also, follow us on all of our social media platforms at Hot Zone Sports and join the sports pages. That is meant for you. This is truly why we do this, for the people. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, click that notification button, and have a blessed week.